school. Now, in these past segments, I've given more of a a commentary based on like my opinion on and how I feel and how I'm tied into it. But now I want to get down to more of a factual basis. Now, let's talk about the Brown versus Board of Education U.S. Supreme Court case. Now, I think the majority of African Americans are familiar with this case, but if you're not, I'll give you a little basis on it. The Brown versus Board of Education case was basically 1/3 of how we got integrated schools. Now, integrated schools are schools that have multiple races in it. Before, we would have just a Caucasian school or an African American school or this or that. But then the Brown versus Board of Education case basically said, hey, what's wrong with having integrated schools? I mean, because we already see African American kids who have Caucasian friends. Martin Luther King, for instance, he had a Caucasian friend, but then he was forced to stop meeting with his friend because his parents thought he was in danger of a Klan incident because he was friends with a Caucasian boy and he was African American. Now, see, integrated schools, basically. If you're familiar with like the Little Rock Nine, then you should know a lot about it. But then let me talk about the Little Rock Nine. The Little Rock Nine were a group of 9 students who went to Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, who basically said, you know what, they were basically the first people to really join in with the Integrated Schools Act. And so that's basically how we got integrated schools. Now, Brown versus Education, as I've previously stated, said that, you know, we need integrated schools. There's nothing wrong with it. And that's basically almost like how we got segregation ended. But then the Brown versus Board of Education case focused more on school and education, as segregation focused more on just daily life and how you would act if you went out to eat or bus boycotts and things like that. Now, another famous case is the Plessy versus Ferguson U.S. Supreme Court case of 1898. Now, on June 7, 1892, Homer A. Plessy was removed from the East Louisiana Railroad train and arrested by Detective C.C. Kane at the corner of Royal and Press Street for civil disobedience and violating the 1890 Louisiana Separate Car Act that separated railroad passengers by race. This soon inspired the Plessy versus Ferguson U.S. Supreme Court case, which stated that the state law which required East Louisiana railroads to segregate trains had denied him his rights under the 13th and 14th Amendments of the United States Constitution. Now, if you're not familiar with the Constitution, I suggest you look that up. But because, see, I'm just going to jump right into it. Basically, this case was talking about Homer Adolph Plessy versus John H. Ferguson. Now, Homer A. Plessy, as I previously stated, was taken off a East Louisiana railroad car and arrested for civil disobedience because he apparently violated the 1890 Louisiana Railroad Car Act. Now, see, basically, the people who sold him his ticket sold him the ticket for a whites-only car, knowing his race. So basically, they set him up to fall. So personally, I think that that he was not at fault for anything because he was not aware that he had a whites-only ticket until he got on the bus, and then Detective C.C. Kane came up and said, "You're under arrest for civil disobedience." Then he finally went, "Oh, they sold me a ticket for the whites-only car when I'm obviously African American." Now, see, thankfully, when they took this to the U.S. Supreme Court, Homer A. Plessy was not charged, as they previously stated he would be, but he finally understood how they basically tormented and bullied him because of the fact that he was African American. Now, see, this also ties in with bullying, which has expanded to modern day cyberbullying, which is bullying with, you know, electronics like this iPhone or a computer and such. And so basically, that's one of the earliest instances on record of the U.S. Supreme Court case that basically shows that he was bullied. And so Homer Adolph Plessy was basically he got to live his life after this. He got to move forward, basically, and that's what I want to do in life. I want us African Americans, us Europeans, Germans, Italians, Creoles. I want us to move forward. Because I know that there will always be a place, and we'll always have to look back and say, hey, you know, we were in slavery and that we were in the Jim Crow era. But then I want us to move forward from that. I want us to make an era where we get to teach our children not to go around with their pants hanging at their knees or to do this to make a living. But I want us generation, because we're going to be the future leaders. My generation, we're going to be the people who kids have to look up and I look up to. And I don't want the future kids of the world to look up and say, hey, you know what, I want to be like this. I want to have a body full of tattoos. I want to curse out everybody in my path, and I want to dress like this, because I want a generation of classy, sophisticated people. And I'm not just saying that African Americans are saying that, oh, we should do this and do that. It's anybody. I want us to have a race of people who can be leaders, not people who other people look at and say, you know, I don't even want my child around that. I don't want my child to be around to see this, because I want a generation where people can say, oh, I'm just so glad I raised my child like this. I don't want a generation of, look at that hooligan robbing a store. And I don't want a generation of stereotypes. Now, if you're not familiar with stereotypes, you probably already know one, like the black people only eat fried chicken and drink Kool-Aid stereotype. Those are types of stereotypes where people think that a race does this, but really we don't. I mean, not all African Americans like fried chicken and Kool-Aid. Not all African Americans dress like this or listen to that, because we're all unique. I mean, we're the same skin color, we're all Homo sapiens, but we have different personalities because we're all different. But then we're all the same from a big view of it, we're all the same, but then from a little view, if you look at every little aspect, we're all different.
And so Lana, looking at the Brown versus the Board of Education and Plessy versus Ferguson, you were able to bring some foundation in reference to separation of the races and et cetera, but in spite of all of that, you still believe that it is the destiny of mankind to come together and everybody's supposed to be able to love one another and accept. Now, how does this leadership conference that you're getting ready to attend, how does that fit into your perceptions in terms of
what Dr. Hand is referencing to is the Junior National Young Leaders Conference. And that is a conference that I was nominated to attend and that I'm going to attend this June of 2014, this summer. Basically, the Junior National Young Leaders Conference is basically where just, you know, academically achieving kids